In the East Valley right now, buyers are routinely asking sellers for anywhere between $5,000 to $15,000 towards closing costs as part of their purchase contract, and sellers are agreeing to it. And this is what normal looks like in today's market. If you're a buyer and nobody has told you this, you're leaving real money on the table. And if you're a buyer who has been asking for concessions and losing deals because of how you're asking, this video is going to tell you exactly where you went wrong. Knowing what to ask for and knowing how to ask for it are two very different skills. Get the first one right and miss the second, and you're asking for something reasonable but still blowing up the deal. This video will cover both. I'm Megan Williams. Jason and I run Blue Collar Homes here in the East Valley. The name is intentional. We came here from Michigan with the Midwestern work ethic and zero shortcuts. And that's exactly how we run our business. No fluff, no spin, just real numbers and straight answers. Over 700 homes sold here in Arizona and counting. We've negotiated hundreds of transactions over the last couple years. We know exactly when to ask, what to ask for, and how to frame it so you get the credit without blowing up the deal. Let's start by understanding what the current market actually looks like for our buyers, because the right concession strategy is different depending on where the market is currently sitting. The short version: buyers have more leverage right now than any other point since 2020. The average sale to list ratio here in the East Valley is sitting with somewhere between 97 to 98%. Only about 7% of homes in Gilbert, for example, are selling above the list price. That number was over 11% just last year, and much higher even the year before. In Queen Creek, for example, we're averaging over 90 days on market, and in some segments, the price reductions are super common. The East Valley has shifted from that frantic seller's market to something a lot more balanced. Buyers who understand their leverage use it, and buyers who don't are going to leave money on the table. Concessions are not a sign of weakness on either side. In this market, they are a standard part of how transactions get structured. Sellers expect to hear requests from concessions. Good listing agents prepare their seller for it. And the question is not whether to ask, it's how to ask. Let me explain what concessions actually are and the different forms that they take. A seller concession is any contribution from the seller that reduces the buyer's out-of-pocket costs at closing or that improves the terms of the deal for the buyer. The most common form is a closing cost credit. The seller contributes a specific dollar amount towards the buyer's closing costs, and instead of that buyer bringing the money to the table, it comes from those seller proceeds. On a $650,000 purchase in Arizona, closing costs for a buyer can financially run somewhere between 2 to 4% on that loan amount, which can be $12,000 to $24,000 or more. A seller contribution of, let's say, 10 grand meaningfully reduces that burden. Another form of concession is a mortgage rate buy-down contribution. Instead of applying those credits towards closing costs, the buyer uses it to buy down their interest rate. One common structure is a permanent rate reduction, using those seller contributed funds to pay down discount points to lower the rate for the whole life of the loan. Another is a temporary buy down, like a 2-1 buy down, where the rate is artificially lower for the first 2 years. If you're buying in today's rate environment and you plan to stay in that home for a while, a permanent rate reduction might be worth it over time rather than the same amount applied towards your closing costs. This is something to run through with your lender before you decide how to structure your request. A seller can also contribute to a home warranty, a 1-year coverage policy on all your major systems and appliances. Some buyers ask for this directly, especially on older homes. Maybe the AC unit is older or a water heater is older and concerning. It doesn't move a large dollar figure, but it does reduce post-closing risk and is a reasonable ask in today's market. And then there are repair credits, situations where the inspection might reveal some issues and the buyer asks for a price reduction or a credit rather than repairs. I'll talk about the inspection strategy separately because it has its own timing and its own structure. Now let's talk about when to ask for concessions and how to structure that request, because this is where most buyers will get it wrong. The first opportunity to ask for the concessions is in your initial offer. If you are making an offer on a home that's been on the market 30, 45, maybe 60 days, a home where the seller has not seen competing offers and where the listing history suggests that they're motivated, building a concession request into that initial offer is entirely appropriate. In a market where nearly every active listing is dealing with extended days on market and where that sale to list ratio is consistently below 100%, coming in with an offer that includes closing cost contributions is not unusual or aggressive. It's normal. What matters is how you frame it relative to your purchase price. There are two ways to structure a concession request. You can offer a lower purchase price and ask for no concessions, and the seller sees a lower price. Or you can offer closer to that ask price and ask for concessions that cover your closing costs. And the seller sees a higher price on paper, but nets a similar amount. Which approach works better depends on the seller's situation. If a seller has a mortgage they need to pay off and they're watching that net closely, they might prefer a higher price with concessions over a lower price with no concessions, even if the net is the same, because the higher price affects how that transaction is going to look in some cases. If the seller is paying cash for their next house and a net is what matters, they'll do the math and it comes out exactly the same either way. Your agent should have enough information about the seller's situation to guide you through on which framing is most likely to land favorable to the seller. The second opportunity is during the inspection period. In Arizona, after the home inspection, your agent will deliver what we call the BINSR, the buyer's inspection notice and seller's response, within the 10-day inspection window. It can request a price reduction or a credit in lieu of repairs. A credit in lieu of repairs is essentially concession that's negotiated after the inspection rather than in the initial offer. This is an appropriate time to ask for things that the inspection reveals: a credit towards a hot water heater that's at the end of its life, a credit towards an HVAC system that's maybe not working, a credit towards work the inspector recommended. The key is that your request should be grounded in what the inspection actually found. Using the inspection period to negotiate purely on price when the inspection came back clean is a completely different dynamic. Sellers will see through it, and it damages that negotiating relationship we've built from the beginning. The inspection period is not the right time to pile on a long list of small requests after a genuinely clean inspection. Focus your asks on items that genuinely matter. A single well-framed credit request tied to something specific in the inspection report is far more effective than a laundry list of small items that reads as an opportunistic rather than reasonable. Here's the part that buyers, especially buyers from out of town, most often get wrong. There's a version of asking for concessions that signals to the seller that the buyer is going to be difficult throughout the whole transaction. A low offer plus a large concession request plus a tight inspection period with an extensive repair list plus a request for seller paid home warranty plus a request for extended closing all stack on top of each other, and it signals a pattern that makes sellers nervous. Even in a buyer's market, sellers still have choices. They can counter, decline, they can wait for a buyer who feels less demanding. And in this market where inventory is elevated, but good homes in good locations are still seeing multiple showings, a transaction that reads as high maintenance can also be a liability. The buyers who are most effective at getting concessions are the ones who are strategic rather than opportunistic. They pick one or two things to ask for and they ask clearly. They tie the request to real data, market conditions, comparable sales, inspection findings, rather than making requests that feel arbitrary. They structure their offers in a way that make the seller feel like this is a clean, low drama transaction, even though they're giving something up. This is a skill, and it's one of the most valuable things an experienced agent brings to the table. I want to give you a few specific examples of what's working right now here in the Valley so you can have a concrete picture. On a $700,000 home in Gilbert that's been on the market for 45 days, it's entirely reasonable to structure an offer at or near the asking price with seller contribution of, let's say, $10,000 to $15,000 towards closing costs. The seller has been sitting and they've had limited activity, and a clean offer with a motivated buyer is worth more to them than squeezing back on that $10,000 to $15,000. On a $550,000 home in Queen Creek that came back from inspection with an HVAC system that's maybe 15 years old, a hot water heater that's about the same, and a BINSR requesting a $5,000 credit in lieu of addressing those deferred maintenance items, is actually grounded in real findings and is easy for the seller to process. It's not a renegotiation of the whole deal. It's an acknowledgement of what the inspection found. On a new construction home with a builder in Chandler, where the base price is set and the builder isn't moving from that purchase price, the conversation shifts to what they'll include: upgrades, lot premiums, builder-funded rate buydowns, or extended warranty packages. Builders don't call these things concessions, but they function the exact same way. Knowing what's on the table and what the builder is willing to fund requires having your own representation, because the sales rep on site works for the builder. Here's the bottom line for buyers here in the Valley right now. The leverage you have with this market is real. Concessions are normal and expected, and they're built into how transactions are being structured every day. But leverage is not the same as a blank check. There's still ways to ask for things that can cost you a deal that doesn't need to die. Know what's reasonable. Ask clearly and specifically. Tie your request to data or inspection findings. Don't stack requests on top of each other unless you've prioritized them. And work with an agent like myself who knows this market well enough to tell you in real time what the seller is likely going to accept and what's likely going to cause problems. When you're ready to actually write an offer and you want someone in your corner who negotiates this every single week, schedule a free buyer call with us. Remember, I'm Megan Williams in the East Valley. Catch you next time.